And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today the Indiana Hoosiers do what they've been doing, and that is take another opponent out behind the Assembly Hall woodshed and just shellac them, wallop them. That's what Indiana did to the Northwestern Wildcats today, winning 89-57, a 32-point victory on a day when a lot of people thought this was going to be a tight game, because remember, the context of this win is very important. When Indiana was setting a new school record for three-pointers made in that Illinois game, Northwestern was preparing to play Wisconsin. This was last Tuesday, or was preparing to play Maryland, at Maryland. And that game would go to overtime in Maryland. Now, Maryland would end up winning, but it showed what this Northwestern team is capable of. And that's why a lot of folks thought that Northwestern could come into Assembly Hall today, give the Hoosiers a good, tough game, maybe slow the pace down, make it a hard day for Indiana. But Indiana put that to bed right from the start, jumping out to a 10-0 lead. And while Northwestern was able to battle back a little bit in the first half, the Hoosiers used a huge run at the end of the first half and then continued it right out of the gates in the second half with a 13-6 run to start the second half. And the final result was an 89-57 victory in which Indiana looked extremely impressive on both ends of the floor. And we are going to break it all down for you right now on another fun, exuberant, joyful episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. Very excited to be here. I am joined today by Andy Bottoms and Will DeWitt. Ryan Phillips, unfortunately, could not make it. He woke up today with the flu, so he will not be here, but he has already submitted his pick for the IU-Wisconsin game, which we will get to at the end of the show. But let's start out today, as we always do, with our banner moment. And look, we've come on the show a lot recently during this winning streak, and we've praised Yogi, and we've praised the guys on the bench, and we've praised the freshmen. And it is time to lead off a show praising the man in charge, Tom Crean, because the difference in this team from what we saw in that Duke game, in Durham, the Durham debacle, to what we're seeing now is like night and day. And Tom Crean deserves some praise for that. And so, I was listening to his pregame show today, and he was talking about how, they always, when they introduce the next opponent to the team, they will cut up a video showing what that team does best. As Crean said, what it likes to hang its hat on. And so to start out the video on Northwestern, they showed the guys 6 offensive rebounds that Northwestern got against Maryland. And Crean said that was their big point of emphasis. The biggest point of emphasis was being tough on the boards, because if you look at Northwestern coming into this game, they were 4th in the Big Ten in offensive rebounding percentage and 2nd in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding percentage. Now, Indiana also very good as a rebounding team this year, so it was strength on strength. And Tom Crean said that he really wanted his guys to be physical and aggressive rebounding. So what happened today? Indiana absolutely owned Northwestern on the glass. The Wildcats only had 5 offensive rebounds as a team. Overall, Indiana had 40 rebounds to Northwestern's 23. The Hoosiers had 11 offensive rebounds to Northwestern's 5. The percentages were all in Indiana's favor. Indiana rebounded 85% of its misses on the defensive glass, which is outstanding. And on the offensive glass, Indiana got up close to what it normally does with 37.9%. Now, it's not just the rebounding that is the reason why that's today's banner moment. It's the fact that a coach can show a team something, make it the highlight of the game plan, and the team goes right out and does it. And Indiana was doing it right up until the final buzzer. You saw OG Anunoby go up for that rebound with about 2 minutes left, and he ends up crashing to the floor, holding his head, but he was rebounding with toughness. Nick Zeisloft had a sequence in the first half, and I talked about this on the halftime show. There was a tough rebound where, he was going to have to go into the Northwestern guy. It was a 50-50 rebound. There was going to be body contact. It's a kind of rebound that sometimes we've seen Indiana guys shy away from in the past. Zeisloft did not, and not only did he get the rebound, he got fouled, and then went down on the other end, on the offensive end, got an offensive rebound that ended up leading to a dunk for Thomas Bryant. And so today's banner moment is a huge tip of the cap to Tom Crean, because if you're going to hang another banner, if you're going to win a Big Ten title, if you're going to make a run in March, you have to have a team and a leader and the rest of the players who are all on the same page. And you could tell Yogi did a great job today on the glass. He clearly had listened to what Tom Crean had said. The entire team did. And just that synergy, the way that the coach and the team seem in sync right now, it is so great to watch. It's beautiful to see, and that's the reason why Indiana isn't just beating opponents right now. It is annihilating opponents, and it's time that we give Tom Crean some credit, because while he deserves some criticism early in the season for the way the team was playing, he absolutely deserves credit for the way they've turned it around. Excellent job, Coach Crean, and the Hoosiers move their Big Ten record to 7-0. Excellent job. All right. Let's hear from Andy Bottoms and Will DeWitt. Andy, we will start with you. Your bottoms line on today's IU victory.
Yeah, I think there's two key points that come to mind for me, and one piggybacks well on what you said. I think I tweeted this in the first half. I mean, the difference in defensive rotations between now and earlier in the season is just night and day. Hartman, a number of times as they defended these, high ball screens, is able to, get down there and cut things off. And, Northwestern did a good job of adjusting that in the second half during stretch. And I think Sean Harrington on the commentary did a good job of talking about what that was, where they just really started playing four guys up higher. So it made the help, there wasn't anybody right there to help. But I thought IU adjusted well after that. And I think, how you've seen them evolve over that, it's more than James Blackman not being there. It's certainly easy for people to point to that, and while that probably is some small part of it, it certainly isn't all of it. And I think the coaching staff and the players deserve a ton of credit for how they've turned that aspect of the game around, as well as just the unselfishness. Again today, 21 assists on 30 made baskets. That's becoming a theme for this team. The ball movement that we saw so often last year seems to have resurfaced to a point where there were a couple times I thought guys were almost too unselfish, which I suppose is a good problem to have. But just the way they're sharing the basketball, having a good time, playing it. And one of the things I emailed you guys at some point on Wednesday, I think, after having gone to the game on Tuesday night, and just talked about, you can just tell how much more fun they're having, and they seem more tight-knit, and maybe some of that is, fanboy stuff from being there and getting excited about it, but I don't think that it is. It looks like more than that out there, and it's great to see these guys, have a good time. And my second overarching point is about the paper tiger comment from Andy Katz at halftime, who seems to backtrack a little bit off of that on Twitter with some IU fans. Jeff Goodman made a similar point. You can't argue that IU has played the toughest Big Ten schedule of anybody out there to this point. I wouldn't argue that. No one in their right mind would. However, the way that they're winning the games matters. It's more than just winning the games that you're supposed to win. The way they're doing it, the manner in which they're just dismantling some of these teams who have had good wins or taken good teams pretty far. To win at Nebraska, they just beat Michigan State in Michigan State. To beat Illinois, who beat Purdue in a way that I honestly could not fathom after having watched Illinois play for 40 minutes the other night. And Northwestern takes Maryland to overtime and played Maryland pretty well, I think, the first time they played. So you could certainly argue what the Big Ten record is of who they've beaten and all those things, but this team deserves a ton of credit for the way in which they're beating them, not just the fact that they're winning the games.
Absolutely. Will, your stat of the game. How do you pick one? There's a lot of good stats in this one.
Well, I was going to say, where do I start? Especially you kind of touched on the rebounds. Andy kind of took mine here with the assists, but I'll kind of get in here with the assists a little bit. Like Andy said, we were 21 assists on 30 field goals. Well, that's 70%, assists on our field goals, and we only came into the game averaging about 60%, in conference play. So that was, it really just kind of proved just of how great the passing was, how unselfish everybody played, which was really cool to see. And 13 of those assists came from Yogi, Troy, and Robert. Yogi had 6, Troy had 4, and Johnson only had the 3. So between those 3 and everybody else, the assists were coming in bunches. And then we also finished the game with a 2.1 assist to turnover ratio, which is pretty great considering that we did have 8 turnovers in the first half, only 2 in the second. I think we went 15, 16 minutes without a turnover for a while. So the combination of kind of just taking care of the ball as well as making that extra pass, I think just kind of just proves why we won by over 30 points today.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the turnovers, because that was, and again, on the halftime report, that was really the only thing. Indiana's turnover percentage in the first half was 23%. And, they had the 8 turnovers, and then only the 2 in the second half. It's like the one thing that they weren't great at in the first half, they went in the second half, corrected it. And, gone are the days where this team comes out in the second half and just, kind of falls flat early. We've really been playing well at the start of the second half. So many great stats. We'll go through them. So many great individual performances. We will go through them. here on this edition of the Assembly Call. Real quick, I do want to remind everybody, those of you watching live, those of you listening on the podcast, those of you listening on the Sports Buzz in the Louisville area, the best way to connect with the Assembly Call, in addition to the live show and participating in the live chat, is to get on our email list. You can do that one of two ways. You can go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and enter your email address, or you can text INDIANA to 44144. That's text Indiana to 44144, an option a lot of people have been doing because our list is growing. It's almost to 1,500 people. We send our post-game analysis emails the morning after every game. That is content that we do not post anywhere else, and so we'd love to send it to you. So get on our email list, and we will be able to do that. Again, text Indiana to 44144 or go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. All right, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show, another victorious episode of the Assembly Call IU postgame show as Indiana wins 89-57. So, Andy, let's talk about the one thing in this game that maybe wasn't so great, and that's some of the post defense on Alex Ola. And
I thought you were going to say Trey Demps. That was
well,
good. I went a different direction.
Demps did score 17 points.
He got 12 of those real early, though.
He did. He had 14 in the first half, and some of them were tough shots. And I thought once Yogi switched over to him full time, he really struggled to get looks. And so, I made the joke to you on Twitter that Trey Demps is kind of like a combination of Jamie Skelton and Jess Settles, the guy who just never seems to graduate and always has a big game against Indiana. So we tip our caps to Trey Demps because the guy just makes tough shots against Indiana, and without him making those tough shots, this is a 50-point IU win. But Alex Ola is the other guy who played well. And to make this victory for Indiana even more impressive, remember, Ola is coming off a stress fracture in his foot. He didn't play that much against Maryland. He was much more at full strength today, and you saw what he can do. And even with that, Indiana blitzed him by 32. But talk a little bit about Ola, Andy, because, he did have 19 points, and I thought the one weakness for Indiana was, when they got Ola isolated one-on-one with Thomas Bryant down low. And for all the things that Thomas Bryant does well, he's still susceptible to a grizzled senior veteran taking him to school on the block. And that's not, unexpected. Thomas is still learning, and he's improved a lot in defense, on defense. But what did you see today in terms of Indiana's post defense that, maybe wasn't so good, or some corrections they can make so that as we face some better big men in the future, specifically I'm thinking about, Diamond Stone at Maryland, the big guys at Purdue, so that we can have a little bit better chance of defending those guys better?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer Bryant with talking about how well I thought Juwan Morgan played against Ola when he came in the first half, and seemed kind of odd. I noted the lineup out there that Juwan Morgan essentially was playing the 5, although with some of the size along the front line, that's it doesn't matter a great deal whether you're playing power forward or the center. But I thought what Morgan did a much better job of than Bryant was really forcing him out further on the catch. Bryant really allowed him to catch the ball really deep, and I thought that he just, at the point he caught it where he's got a foot or both feet in the lane, it was really too late. So really doing the work early to keep him out of there was important. And Ola's got a good set of post moves in there, and I thought Morgan was kind of quick enough to react to some of those. So I thought the big thing for Bryant that he was really just overall positioning, one of which was just in terms of where he caught the ball, and the other was, a couple times he got really up on the kind of the high side of him and left an easy way for him to go to the basket. Well, when you only have a step, there's no room for any help to come to the baseline, and he wasn't close enough to kind of force him underneath the basket. So I thought in terms of true post plays, that was where he struggled, was just positioning. Some of the pick and roll plays, I thought you touched on a little bit earlier, that the way they kind of moved other players out of the way, so it was harder for the help to get there. I think Pardon was typically the beneficiary of that, but Ola had a couple baskets that way as well. So I thought, it would be good if you want to look at kind of how to play him. The possessions when Morgan guarded him in the first half was probably about as good a blueprint as you can have, and I thought Bielfeldt in large part did a good job, and he seems to be pretty locked into what they're trying to do defensively. That showed up pretty clearly when I was there on Tuesday. He just has a good idea of positioning and some of those things. So I thought it was more of a struggle for Bryant, where just allowed himself to get overwhelmed and give up position, and as athletic as he is and as good of a shot blocker as he can be, just didn't allow himself the time and space to recover.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Juwan Morgan because I thought this was one of his better performances. He was terrific against Wisconsin, especially defensively, but he showed some offense today. I mean, Juwan was one of, 8 guys who had at least 7 points, grabbed a couple of rebounds, and there was a great sequence, I believe it was in the first half, where, Juwan gets ready to shoot a 3 from the corner, and you're thinking, no, Juwan, and then it goes in, and it's like, yes! And then what I loved is he made the 3, but it's not like he was just resting on his laurels. He sprinted to the other end and picked up Ola and played great defense on Ola on that possession. So it's a great sequence for Juwan, just showing some of his skills and how locked in he is, and then some of the moves that he made late down low were really nice too. Now, Will, I know you want to talk about Bryant McIntosh because, look, coming into this game for Northwestern, they were going to need their top 3 guys to play well. And when you look at Ola scoring 19 and Demps scoring 17, they held up their end of the bargain to a certain extent. But then no one else really did anything outside of those couple of minutes where Derek Pardon, was just getting wide open layup after wide open layup. And McIntosh is the guy who Indiana was really able to shut down, Will.
Yeah, and that, the Greensburg, Indiana native, maybe just playing in Indiana, which just proved to be a little too daunting for him. But, he came in the game averaging 15.6 points per game. Well, today he only had 4 points, only shot 2 for 12 from the field, and he finished with the same number of fouls that he actually did points. And his 4 points, Jared, are the least of the season. His previous low was 7 against Minnesota. So, I mean, the Hoosiers doing a really good job with him, and especially Robert Johnson, I thought, did a really good job playing defense on him.
Yeah, and to McIntosh's credit, he was able to get 6 assists and 6 rebounds and contribute that way, but the 4 turnovers also, and some of them were really bad turnovers, and you could see Chris Collins really getting frustrated with him. But Will, you mentioned Robert Johnson, and we do have the president of the Robert Johnson fan club here online with us today on this episode of the Assembly Call. So we'll kick it over to him to discuss what was certainly a terrific defensive performance from Robert Johnson, but what I loved is that we saw the shooting confidence there again. Robert goes 3 of 5 from downtown, 9 points, 3 assists, and 0 turnovers. And he added to that 6 rebounds and 2 steals, so it was a really good all-around performance from Robert Johnson. Wouldn't you say, Mr. President?
Yeah, definitely. That's a couple, really good all-around games for him in a row, and I really thought, the shots were nice. He hit those couple threes in the first half, but I just really thought his defense on McIntosh was really good. I mean, he's a guy who has the ball in his hands a ton for them. Came into the game with an assist rate over 40%, which is good for 8th in the country, and if he can manage to keep that up, is probably going to even finish higher than that. And a guy who'd really been able to score pretty well over the course of the season, as Will mentioned. So I thought Robert did a really good job, and as you mentioned earlier, the combination of he and Yogi on Demps and McIntosh over the last 30-ish minutes of the game was really impressive, and speaks to how well this team's improved defensively, because as much as the rotations have improved as well, one of the other keys for IU was just playing good on-ball defense, keeping guys out of the lane, and those kinds of things. So I thought he played really well there. Definitely stepping into his threes with more confidence. He ended up 3 of 5 from 3, missed all 4 of his 2-pointers, but it was when I noticed him the other night being there. They got ready to kind of huddle up to start the second half, and he was shooting threes and wouldn't go to the huddle until he made one. Kind of like, I always tell my daughter that when she's in the driveway practicing. I'm like, you can't go inside after a miss. You can't do that. So he was, but you can tell he's really working at it. It's really important to him to do that. And I think, while he's going to miss shots, as they all will from time to time, his confidence level, which we were pretty worried about early on, or early in the Big Ten season, seems to have rebounded really well, and he's taken the shots with more confidence. And I think a lot of people have noted that, and I think a good thing for him. But he's also a guy who you don't need to score a ton, and to be able to grab 6 rebounds, which I think is around what he had against Illinois, the few assists, and the no turnovers, which has really been kind of the bugaboo for him over his first couple of years, from a turnover perspective. He's playing under control, and I thought did a really good job. And definitely what stood out, though, was certainly the defense on McIntosh, who's really the guy that makes Northwestern go.
The other guy that I want to talk about is Yogi Ferrell. I mean, look, this is Yogi's last lap. It's his senior season. I know we mentioned earlier on a show earlier in the season that, we're not going to take Yogi for granted. And, on a day like today, he didn't break any career records, didn't do anything particularly noteworthy just because he's such a good player, and we're so used to this from him. But he led Indiana in scoring with 17, led Indiana in assists with 6, did have 3 rebounds, a steal, only had 1 turnover. His defense was outstanding. And, there are these moments in games where Yogi is taking over. We saw him do it at the end of the Minnesota game, and we've seen him do it in different. We saw him do it at the end of the Wisconsin game, and we'll see him really assert himself in certain moments. And there was a moment in the second half that I thought was really indicative of this kind of alpha male feeling that Yogi seems to have about himself right now when it comes to these Big Ten games. It was 49-30. And look, it didn't look like Northwestern was going to make a big run. But if they were going to do it, it was going to come at this point because it was 49-30. Alex Ola got fouled, made the bucket, had an and one opportunity. He's, screaming and really excited into it. They have a huddle. Bryant McIntosh is over kind of punching guys in the chest, getting them going. And I thought, okay, they look like they're ready to turn it up a notch and maybe go on a run. And if they were going to do it, it was going to happen then. And so I've got this written down in my notes. The next two line in my notes, Yogi makes a 2, Yogi for 3. I think he made another shot after that. And it was like this little mini run by Yogi that was basically saying, you're down by 19. You're going to lose by 30. This is my house. Goodbye. And we're seeing that from Yogi, where he's really. And look, I have no idea if he saw that and picked that spot specifically, but it's just kind of one of those anecdotal things that, you see it, and it just completely shut the door. And it's kind of like after that, not that Northwestern went through the motions, but you kind of knew the game was over. There was no real chance, and it's just great to see a leader like that continuing to step up game after game in big moments. And, for this game, that was about as big a moment as you got in the second half because it wasn't competitive. But a hat tip to Yogi. And Andy, I want to talk about Troy as well because I thought, look, Troy's line would look a lot better if he had just made some layups. I think there were 3 wide-open layups that Troy missed. And other than that, no real ill-advised shots. He did have 3 turnovers, and so that's maybe the one kind of, negative on his stat line. But 9 points, 4 assists, 7 boards, 2 of them offensive. He really led the charge when it came to rebounding. Did have a block, and I thought for the most part was doing Troy Williams energy things. And there was a sequence in the second half where Yogi found him twice working the baseline. One was kind of an alley-oop type, another one was just a great little pass, and Troy was able to finish, kind of did a little reverse layup on the right side. And we're starting to see, even though Troy did have the 3 turnovers, and there were a couple times where he forced it. We're seeing a lot less of him initiating the offense in the half court and kind of having those Troy no moments, that we'll seem to have. And I thought for the most part it was another under control performance from him where, he's scoring in the half court, he's getting rebounds, playing with energy, and that's what Indiana needs. What did you think of Troy's overall game today?
Yeah, I thought a lot of what you did. I mean, I think he took a 3 pretty early in the first half, which was an open look and not necessarily a terrible one. I thought he played pretty frenetic early, but really settled in after that. And to your point, had some trouble finishing, as did a number of guys. It felt like in the second half where it could have been an even bigger advantage. But I thought in general, he played really well, and I think you've seen, to your point, him initiating the offense a little bit less, and you've seen Collin Hartman a little bit more in that role, which is another adjustment that I think we've seen from Crean as well. And Hartman's, made some really good plays off the dribble, which is not something that I anticipated saying earlier this season, and most fans didn't as well. But I think that's helped take a little bit of that pressure off Troy and really allowed him to, work the baseline, which is what he's done really well over the course of his career and has continued to do well today. So I thought he played under control. I think the rebounding, we saw that last year when this team would play well. He would be really one of the leading rebounders. And I think to some extent that just shows his level of effort, engagement, things like that. So I thought, overall was good, and 4 assists for him is probably a season high, if not close to it. So, doing some good things, getting other guys involved, and I think, we know what kind of finisher he can be, so that's something that with him certainly you don't worry about too much. As far as Yogi, I mean, it's funny that you notice some of the same things, like during these stretches where he's willing to set other guys up during other stretches, but really has a good feel for when he needs to make a play, and just it's become clear over the last few weeks just how much of this of his team this really is. I noticed him make a comment about that and even call it his team in one of the post-game press conferences, I think after the Nebraska game, and thought that was kind of a cool thing to see, and him really embracing that leadership role, and I think just kind of knowing when to pick his spots and when to get others involved. part of the evolution that he's had over the different roles he's been asked to play. And like I emailed you guys again after being there on Tuesday, like there's no question about whose team it is at this point, and I think that's really cool to see. And feel like you see this a lot with seniors, and whether this is true with him or not, we have no way of knowing. But at some point it sets in that like this is it. This is this is my last year. These are my last games, and the way he's responded to that, I think, fits well with his, that I'm a Hoosier video that I know you guys linked to. I think those kinds of things speak to him really starting to understand, what he wants his legacy to be, and all those kinds of things as he closes out his senior season.
Yeah, really good quote here from Chris Collins. This is Justin Albers, who's there in the postgame. Chris Collins, Northwestern coach, says they are really confident right now. You can see that even when they're warming up, they seem to have great chemistry. And we've heard a lot of the IU players talking about the chemistry and kind of family feeling. And sometimes people will pay lip service to that, and you don't quite know if it's real, and you can't quite see it on the court, so you wonder. But, man, everything we're seeing on the court is matching up with all of those statements. Opposing coaches are talking about it. And that chemistry is a big reason why these Hoosiers are playing so well and just looking so good on both ends of the floor and so in tune with each other. Will, you've got a little stat here in the chat, which kind of goes along with the rebounding that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, yeah. You're talking about, the big difference between offensive rebounding. Well, out of they only had 5 offensive rebounds for Northwestern. So out of those 5, 0 second chance points for them today, which I don't know if you know, that's pretty darn good.
It's pretty good, yeah, because 2 of those 5 offensive rebounds were team offensive rebounds. So, I mean, it's not like, when Indiana did give them up that they were giving up buckets right after that. So that's great. Andy, you are spot on in our chat because that's where I was going next is Collin Hartman. The struggle with hosting these shows on these massive blowouts like the Ohio State, Illinois, Northwestern game is I constantly feel like we're burying the lead because there's like 10 great performances to talk about, and it's hard to know where to go first. And now I feel bad that we haven't talked about Hartman because I thought this is one of the best games Hartman played in an Indiana uniform. And it started from the opening tip where on Indiana's very first possession, Hartman takes the ball, goes all the way to the hoop, and makes this beautiful running layup. And, Andy, you mentioned earlier how there's kind of become this new wrinkle in Indiana's offense where, like, Collin Hartman, creator off the dribble. And we're seeing him much more comfortable putting the ball on the floor, and he's really smart about it. There was a sequence in the first half. Indiana was up, 23-15, and Northwestern was keeping it around that 6, 7, 8 point mark. And Yogi and Hartman went out. The Hoosiers' offense, got a little bit out of sync, as it'll tend to do when Yogi's out of the game. But as soon as they came back in, Yogi found Hartman in the corner. Instead of forcing a 3, Hartman dribbled down the baseline, drew the defense to him, and very calmly found Yogi for a wide-open 3-pointer. And we're seeing a lot of that from Collin, where not only is he proving that he's a great shot maker, and he was 3 of 5 from 3-point range, made that layup like he said, so he had the 11 points. But then, creating for other guys, and he had a couple of assists. The thing with Hartman is that what he creates on offense doesn't always show up in the box score because he is so good at keeping the ball moving. Heather and I were actually watching a Spurs game last night, and what we were noticing was just how well the Spurs move the ball, and it never stops, and they're so good at moving the ball with the pass. And look, obviously Indiana isn't comparable to the Spurs in terms of the offense, but when Indiana is humming, you see them doing something similar with the ball, where it's constantly moving, and they're constantly reversing the ball, so the defense has to adjust, and by the time the defense adjusts, there's a wide-open 3-pointer. And what Hartman's great at isn't always making the pass that gets the assist. It's making the pass that leads to the pass that leads to the assist. And we saw a lot of that today from him, in addition to his 5 rebounds, in addition to some great defensive rotations, which aren't sexy and won't get you on the SportsCenter top 10. But there was one specifically late in the first half where Northwestern had gotten really comfortable getting the ball into Alex Ola, and they found him about a step away from the block on the right, near the right baseline, and it looked like Ola was going to have just a really simple turnaround jumper that you would assume that he was going to make. But Hartman, attentive to what was going on, playing defense for his teammates, not just for himself, noticed, had a great rotation, was there as soon as Ola caught the ball, so that when Ola turned, Hartman was there in his space, and it made it uncomfortable. Ola missed the shot. Indiana got the rebound, went down and scored. And those are those little, hashtag Collin Hartman things plays that they don't always show up in the box score, but they make such a big difference. There were several times where Hartman would hedge down and just make it an uncomfortable pass for the Northwestern perimeter player so they couldn't get it into Ola. And it would deter a post pass, and then Northwestern would have to pass the ball around the perimeter, whereas we know Yogi and Robert Johnson were playing great perimeter defense. So I thought overall just a great performance from Collin, one where some of it showed up in the box score with the 11 points and the 5 rebounds, but frankly, I thought some of his most important contributions didn't show up in the box score. What did you see from him today, Andy?
Yeah, it was definitely a vintage Collin Hartman things game for those that have followed along with us for a while. I mean, he just, to your point about the defensive rotations, it was either that play that you mentioned in the first half or another one in the second half where he made another great play, forced a bad shot or a steal, and then drilled a 3 on the other end. And, I think he did the same thing early in the Illinois game where he hit a shot early and really helped the team get off to a good start. And he had one of the 2 threes that he missed, was off of some more great ball movement that just rimmed out from the corner. So he could very easily have ended up with 14 during the game. But again, I just thought, what you mentioned with the ball movement, I mean, what I think about with him is like he always knows what he wants to do with the ball. I think you get times when you watch Troy and some of those things where like he kind of gets up in the air and is trying to figure out what's going to happen. I always feel like Hartman knows exactly what he wants to do with the with the ball and has a good idea of where he wants to go if he's on the dribble, where he wants to pass, and if he's the recipient of a pass, as you said, to kind of know where to go with it next. And the defense is not surprising to us as much because I think he was one guy that we consistently last year said there may only be one guy on this team that knows what a defensive rotation is and where they need to be, and it always seemed to be him. And so it's certainly good to see him continue that, and maybe he's taught a few things to the team as well. He's another one that one thing I really noticed on Tuesday is he's like a coach on the bench. He was constantly up and pointing things out at guys when he wasn't in the game. And again, just you saw that from a lot of guys. He's one that stood out to me. But again, when you kind of go back to the team piece of this, just how engaged and invested everybody seems now versus the way it seemed earlier in the season. I think he's been a really good vision of that as we've seen him evolve over the course of the season. So some days I think he's a guy that's going to score 11 points like he did today, and some days he might score 6, but I don't know that, again, as you mentioned, his true contribution can be measured by the box score alone.
Yeah. All right, well, we have some exciting news. No, unfortunately, it's not that Ryan decided to show up, although I'm sure everybody wishes that were happening. But we do wish you well, Ryan, and we hope that you're feeling better. And you better be feeling better by next weekend because we are all going to be in Bloomington. We will be at Assembly Hall. Hopefully we have just another great blitzkrieg game where the Hoosiers dominate Minnesota. Obviously there's a game before that, but we will be there in Bloomington. And we'll be at the game, and we're going to be hosting a meetup after the game at Yogi's, not Yogi Ferrell's house, but Yogi's, the bar in Bloomington. And so anybody who is listening, we'd love for you to come. It would be a great treat for us to get to meet any of you who listen to the show, who watch the show. So that will be happening then. And part of the way that we're getting up there, that we're paying for the plane tickets and paying for the tickets, is thanks to the very, very generous support of so many listeners just like you who have donated to the show or bought Assembly Call gear, which helps support the show. A couple of easy ways that you can do that. You can go to assemblycall.com/support, and there are several convenient ways there that you can support the show, become a patron. You can choose whatever is more convenient for you. And then you can also go to assemblycall.com/gear, and we actually have these really cool coasters with the Assembly Call logo on them. You can purchase these. 25% of the proceeds there goes to the Assembly Call. And so in addition to using that to expand our coverage, to give our interns more opportunities, to add cool features like the chat, we'll be using it to pay for Ryan to fly first class all the way from San Diego to Bloomington. Not really, but it is helping us get out there, get the tickets, and so we really appreciate that because we want to make this an annual trip, and so we can't do it without your support, so we greatly appreciate it. And again, that's assemblycall.com/support if you want to help us out. Thank you. All right, well, we are breaking down Indiana's 89-57 victory over Northwestern on this episode of the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Will DeWitt. And the president of the Max Bielfeldt fan club is not here. Ryan is not here. But we do want to talk about Max Bielfeldt, who Ryan likes to call better than advertised Bielfeldt. I like to think of him as never bashful Bielefeld when he's traveling 3 times in the first half and jacking up threes left and right. But Max did a really good job today. He had 13 points, 4 boards, played some solid defense, did what we've come to expect from Max. And Will, I know you had some points that you wanted to make about Max to kick this off.
Yep. Also one thing to add real quick, 6 for 6 from the line, which is pretty darn good as well. But today with his 1 3-pointer that he made today, he now has more 3-pointers as a Hoosier with 12 than he did in his entire career at Michigan, when he only had 11.
Wow. And he, and we're seeing this from him, Andy, where he just, he comes in, and again, I thought on offense he was a little bit excited there in the first half, but I think our concerns from early in the season, if you remember even as far back as the exhibition games, he really seemed willing to take shots, and we were kind of afraid that he was taking shots a little bit too quickly, a little bit out of the offense. But I haven't really felt that, and frankly, he's been so effective that you can't argue with him shooting threes, and you can't argue with when he takes the ball, down low, because he's been really good, and he's gotten fouled, and he's made them. So it was another really strong performance from Max.
Yeah, I think, again, and I think a couple travels earlier was he was just a little bit excited, trying to add to the mixtape that he'd really gotten started with on Tuesday night against Illinois. But just really playing under control, made just showing that he can score at multiple levels. Making threes. He made a kind of a mid-range jumper at one point, and then scored some inside. So at least what he's putting on film for everybody is making defenses have to account for him really at every level, and so he started off with a bang in Big Ten play with that 18-point, 14-rebound game and against Rutgers, then really only scored 8 points in the 3 games following that, which was surprising to me. As I look back at the game log, it just kind of feels like he's been that consistent contributor, but did grab 6 rebounds against Nebraska and 4 against Ohio State, and then these last 3 games he's really stepped it up. He's got 39 points over those 3 games, averaging about 5 rebounds a game over that stretch, and just playing really well, taking good shots. Today did a good job of getting a couple free throws to go down, and just putting pressure on other teams defensively. And I think what we feared at some point during the season was, well, what happens if Thomas Bryant gets in foul trouble? And I think we're starting to see that, given the play of OG and Juwan today, I don't think it's a case of defense and even just having the size inside at that point, but it was kind of like, well, what happens to this team offensively and from a rebounding perspective, and worried that would be a drop-off if Bryant went out. And I think, there's been some cases you could argue it's actually gotten better. At the very least, it's been even. So I think, those are the kinds of things that, we talk about the depth of, 8 guys scoring at least 7 points and those kinds of things. And we've just seen that pay dividends over and over again with being able to count on these guys off the bench when in previous seasons, the depth that this team has shown and the way they're kind of selling into some of those roles and different guys picking up the slack on different nights just isn't something we've seen with any consistency. And I think he's starting to become a guy, again, who is a steadying influence and really has played well.
Some other numbers I wanted to point out that are really jumping out to me as I kind of peruse some of the advanced stats and the season stats. Obviously the points per possession numbers today were great. Indiana, 1.39 points per possession, Northwestern, 0.87. But when you dig deeper, there's a few stats that are really impressive and show the difference in this team. On a recent episode of Podcast on the Brink with Alex Bozich, he pointed out how Indiana, I don't think, has ever had a team with a block percentage, an offensive block percentage of greater than 200. And what that means is that Indiana gets their shots blocked at a rate that is in, one of the worst in the country, basically. It's just always been part of where we've struggled. And this season, coming into this game, Indiana's block percentage, offensive block percentage, was 9.1%. So 185th. Not great, obviously not even really good, but still much better than Tom Crean teams have been in the past. And if you look at today, that was another stat I was afraid of, because Northwestern entered this game blocking 11.9% of opposing shots, which is 58th in the country. They've got their school's all-time leading shot blocker in Alex Ola. And yet today, Northwestern only blocks 3% of Indiana shots. They only got 2. And so that's something that continues to improve, because we know that Indiana needs to play through the paint to be effective, and yet in the past, when Indiana has played through the paint, they've been really susceptible to getting their shots blocked. And today they were able to do it without those shots getting blocked, which is just great to see. And then you look at the shooting numbers. I mean, Indiana's shooting is remarkable. The effective field goal percentage right now, this is before today's game, 61.2%, which is second in the country. 3-point field goal percentage, 44.3%, third in the country. 2-point field goal percentage, 57.6%, which is fifth in the country coming into the game. And Northwestern coming into this game really solid in all of those. I mean, they were giving up an effective field goal percentage of 45.2%, which was 25th in the country. Hoosiers' effective field goal percentage today, 64%, even better than their normal rate, which was already second in the country. So everywhere you look at it, this was an impressive win for Indiana, because what Indiana did is it went toe-to-toe with Northwestern's strengths and beat them. Whether it was rebounding, whether it was shooting, whatever it was, the Hoosiers went strength to strength, and they came out on top. And so you can say what you want. I mean, Northwestern, 17th in the country. This isn't a top 10 team or whatever. And coming into this game, it was actually the game that Ken Palm rated as the third easiest left on Indiana's schedule because it was a home game. But we're nearing the point where we can't keep saying this doesn't matter. And Andy, you pointed this out, and we said after the last game that what Indiana did in this two-game stretch with Northwestern and then at Wisconsin was going to be really important. Well, test passed with flying colors today, as Indiana does a great job against Northwestern, and then we'll see what Indiana can do coming up against Wisconsin. And that is my segue to you, Andy, as we start talking about those Badgers. We saw them on January 5th. They'd been struggling. Indiana wins that game by 1 point, and it very easily could have gone the other way were it not for Yogi's great play late and really some of the great defense that OG Anunoby and Juwan Morgan played on Nigel Hayes. Northwestern or Wisconsin seems to have rebounded a bit since that game. We know that they beat Michigan State, as Michigan State kind of spirals in this three-game losing streak. They were able to go on the road and beat Penn State, so they've won a couple of games. What are your thoughts on this rematch as Indiana goes into a place that obviously has been very, very tough for the Hoosiers to win in recent past?
Well, not unlike Trey Demps, the thoughts of going to the Kohl Center probably make IU fans wake up in a cold sweat over these next couple nights. So, again, there's certainly a lot to be said for the history and the way that IU's played there. So, trying to look past that into how these teams are really playing. Wisconsin, as you mentioned, did play well. They beat Michigan State. They ended up shooting. I just looked at it. I think they shot 36 free throws to Michigan State's 16. So I would imagine that we may see more of the same there. But really, a lot of their points. I mean, they continue to get the vast majority of their points from, the combination of Hayes and Koenig and Ethan Happ, who played really well against Penn State the other night. Although they seem to have a comfortable lead against Penn State and let them back in it. Down the stretch, and won by 6 at Penn State, so they did that. They played well there, but let Penn State come back on them at the end. I definitely don't think at this point they're a team that is gonna they don't have the offense that's gonna come out and just blow somebody away, and their defense isn't quite as good as it's been. So again, I think as we look at keys to the game. And all those kinds of things. I mean, it really starts with what kind of job they can do defensively on particularly Koenig and Hayes. I think Happ to a lesser extent, but Koenig and Hayes are the guys that are going to have the ball in their hands most often. And again, we've seen Yogi rise to that challenge. We've seen Robert Johnson play good defense today. I think it's definitely a game where they need to play good defense, but try to do so without fouling, because as we know, fouls are going to be called up there if anything is close, and depth in the backcourt in particular is a potential issue for this team. So I think we got a lot of guys that can run at Hayes in the front court, but we'll have to kind of see how they can defend Koenig. But I think those are the if you're looking at individual players, I think those are the things to look at there. Rebounding is going to be important again. Wisconsin always does a really good job on the the defensive glass. So can IU get those second chances and things like that? And but they have, struggled more defensively than they have in the past. They're really not ranked well at all in three-point defense. So hopefully IU comes out and can make some of those and play well in that facet of the game. But I think it's really, if they can continue this, commitment to defense, slow down, the couple guys that really make Wisconsin go, then they've got a good chance to win. If they start getting called for a bunch of fouls and let those two guys get going, then I think it's going to go down to the wire. But it definitely. I feel more confident in the game than I did even after they had beaten Wisconsin at IU, just based on how they played in these last couple games.
Yeah, and I don't even know when the last time Indiana won at Wisconsin was, but it was, I think, I don't know, 10, 11 times ago. What'll be the bigger surprise, Andy, if Indiana goes up there and beats Wisconsin, or if Ryan comes on the postgame show and does not immediately complain about the officiating? Because that's a theme every time we play at Wisconsin.
Well, it feels like that's a tough one. I'm not sure which of those is more likely, but I can tell you that if the first one doesn't happen, the second one probably will.
Yes, I am sure that it will. So, okay, so let me ask you this, Andy. Look, you are the world's #1 bracketologist. Go to bracketmatrix.com, all of you, and you can see this. This is Andy. Andy has a great skill at projecting the brackets. And so I know that you're going to have a new one. What are we probably thinking, Tuesday that it'll come out, your next bracket?
Yeah, it should be Tuesday morning.
Okay, so you'll be able to find that at assemblycall.com/bracketology. So tell everybody listening, I mean, where does Indiana kind of stand right now? Because, I mean, look, the 12-game winning streak is impressive. Hoosiers sitting at 17-3 right now. They're first in the Big Ten, all of this. And yet, we know that there's not a lot of highlight wins there on the resume. So how does this game, if at all, impact that? And do you have kind of a general sense of where Indiana stands bracket-wise right now?
Yeah, they're definitely they're one of many interesting resumes at this point. When you really look, it's funny to me when you compare them to like a Maryland. So I'm not saying IU is good as Maryland. Don't get me wrong, but Maryland really doesn't have a lot of quality wins either, and everybody just kind of was like, well, they're a number 2 or a 3 seed. That to me. While at this, you're still at a point where, based on how far you are into conference play, like you can't really ignore the infamous eye test component of what goes into it. So in that regard, I get wanting to put Maryland maybe higher than what their resume would suggest. So IU's definitely an interesting case. They don't really have the loss to Wake Forest. They haven't played very well of late. Lost to UNLV, who hasn't played very well of late and just changed coaches recently. Those have looked better or worse at various points over the course of the season. So losing to Duke, who's struggling a little bit. I don't think losing at Cameron is ever going to be viewed as a black mark. But it's fair that the non-conference schedule, based on how things played out in Maui, wasn't as strong as people thought. The Creighton win is probably looking a bit better than people expected it to at the beginning of the season. The Notre Dame win looks better now that they've beaten Duke. Although I think Demetrius Jackson went down today, so I'm not sure what his situation is. That may really impact them down the stretch and how they look. So. It's definitely an interesting case, and you get into these conversations of, well, who have they really beaten? Like, that is a factor, but it isn't the only factor. I mean, I think while they don't encourage margin of victory and things like that, I do think the manner in which they won these games is still impressive. So I feel like they're kind of in this limbo 7, 8, 9 seed type range right now until I guess the version of the Hoosiers that we now think is is what they actually are, plays some better teams. So that obviously starts. They've got 3 out of the next 4 on the road, including that trip to Wisconsin on Tuesday, and then Michigan, I believe, the following Tuesday. So, we're going to learn a lot more, and I think that those have a chance to impact their seed. They're at a point right now where the people they've beaten, they're not really going to move up a lot, other than if other people lose. And if they had lost to some of these teams, I think it would have dropped them a decent amount. So they're kind of been in this limbo while they just went through and did this. However, what I would say is, you can look up and down the list of ranked college basketball teams to lose over the past few weeks and say it's not always as easy as it looks or you think it should be to win games that you ought to win on paper. And so I do think IU deserves credit for doing that, and I do think they deserve credit, again, as I talked about at the top of the show, for how they've beaten these teams. It'd be one thing if they're coming out and beating a quote-unquote soft Big Ten early schedule by 2-3 points a game, but when you're beating multiple teams by 30 points and really taking them out of what they want to do on a consistent basis, then I think there's, it helps a little bit, but certainly you don't have a top 25 win to hang your hat on. I think Notre Dame is the only top 50 win at this point from an RPI standpoint. So there's work to do, but there are opportunities to do it, and I think, they've done all that they can do. All you can do at this point is, beat who's in front of you. They've done a great job of doing that in many cases in impressive fashion, picked up some road wins along the way, and so now they just need to prove over these next few games that that's who this team is, and I think that starts to become, something that really builds and builds as their resume evolves going forward.
That's our new breaking news sound here on the Assembly Call, because we have breaking news The KenPom rankings are updated, and ladies and gentlemen, your Indiana Hoosiers are now in the top 300 in the country in turnover percentage. Take a picture. The Hoosiers' new turnover percentage of 20.6 that was buoyed by today's terrific performance at only 15.6 now has the Hoosiers at 299th in the country in turnover percentage. So that's big. That's big progress for the Hoosiers. But more importantly than that, the Hoosiers now have a top 50 defense in the country. Indiana's new adjusted defensive efficiency is 96.1 after today's sterling defensive performance. The Hoosiers' offense is at 17. And again, that block percentage number that we talked about, Indiana's block percentage number now is 9%, which is 172nd. And again, that doesn't look impressive unless you know the context of what we've been dealing with here since Tom Crean has been the coach. And that's just, it's one of those subtle improvements that is making a really big difference, and it's helping Indiana offset those turnovers. And, of course, what's really helping Indiana offset the turnovers is just shooting lights out. Second in effective field goal percentage, third in three-point percentage, fifth in two-point field goal percentage. All of those numbers continue to look incredible. Andy, did you think that by mid-January we would be saying that Indiana is top 50 in the country in defense? Like, what the hell happened?
No, I would have bet my money. I would have bet more money that I'd be riding a unicorn to and from work than IU ending up in the top 50 on defense. So, again, I mean, as we talked about, I mean, these coaches and players deserve just a ton of credit for it. I mean, I know you guys touched on it on Tuesday night. You touched on it as well today. I mean, they deserve a lot of credit. It has not been a small turnaround. It has been a huge one.
Yeah, it has, and like you said, I mean, you know, we kicked off this show, you know, talking about the job Tom Crean did, and he mentioned in his post-game comments, just looking at some of the tweets coming through, that assistant coach Rob Judson did a really good job of scouting for this game, and he gave him some praise. And yeah, I thought Yogi had a great quote that, you know, this Indiana team needs to come out. You know, they had a few stretches today where they could have played better defense, which was true, even though they played terrific defense for most of the day. And then he said, now we have to take this mentality on the road. And that is the key now for Indiana, is to take this mentality on the road, and because if they do, now they can win some of these games on the road. And so we'll see if they can do that. Will, you have a preposterous question that you would like to pose here?
Yeah, why not? You know, when you have wins like this, I mean, you can ask those type of questions. So my question to you two is it too early to talk about Tom Crean and being the Big Ten Coach of the Year?
I'll take a first stab at this. I say, well, I mean, if you were going to give the award out today, then, you know, obviously you look at he and Fran McCaffrey as your two guys. I do think and he would be in the discussion. I do think it's too early just because we have to see what this team does in February. Can they avoid that February swoon that we've seen, that we saw last year? And how do they do in the tougher venues against the tougher teams? But he certainly put himself in a position to be in the discussion. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's funny. I saw Sam Vecini, one of the CBS sports college basketball writers, posted a similar question. I don't even know if he posed it as a question, just kind of said, you know, that Crean at this point might be his pick for it. And so Jeff Goodman lashed back out and talked about Fran McCaffrey, which is totally fair. I mean, the way Iowa has played has been incredibly impressive. So certainly don't want to take anything away from them. I think if you look at it from the sense of what were the expectations to the beginning of the year to what the expectations of the year are now, then I think it's McCaffrey hands down. I mean, a lot of people didn't, you know, thought I was a, you know, 7th place team in the Big Ten. I had him right on the bubble. I think had him out of my preseason bracket projections, which luckily the rankings on bracket metrics are not based on. But you know, they've done really well compared to what their expectations were. If you look at IU, expectations started really high. They kind of bottomed out after the game in Duke. But if you look at kind of in season and, you know, steering things out of a nosedive perspective, it's really hard to find anybody who's turned things around any more than Crean has for, you know, a team that either was struggling or anything like that. So it's kind of interesting what you value in that perspective. I think he's certainly there. I can't think of anybody outside of those two who's probably a legitimate Big Ten candidate for that award at this stage of the game. So I definitely think it's an interesting debate. It's certainly too early to call it, but you know, if this team continues to play this way and finishes, you know, 13-5, 14-4 in the Big Ten, I think you'd be hard pressed not to look at it just based on losing Blackman, how the team has evolved, and just being able to pull things out of an absolute tailspin at one point during the season. So he gets a lot of credit for that. Whether that makes him the Big Ten Coach of the Year or not, I don't have any idea, but I think it's not an unwarranted discussion.
Yeah, Andy, I think something was messing up with your audio there. But just to add a little bit of perspective to this too, I think it's important to remember, we don't want to have shifting expectations, because I think this Indiana program has been a victim of that a little bit in recent years. Look, before the season started, we said this team, this should be a second weekend NCAA tournament team, and that we all expected something like an Elite Eight performance and competing in the Big Ten. So what happened is Indiana played so poorly at the start of the year, especially in Maui, especially at Duke, that the expectations kind of got lowered. But even with that, with how much Indiana had struggled coming into Big Ten play, we all looked at the start of the schedule and said Indiana should be at a minimum 6-1, and Indiana sits here at 7-0. And so I do think Tom Crean deserves a lot of credit for getting it turned around, especially the manner in which we've gotten it turned around, because I don't think anybody expected 7-0 with 3 25-point wins at home against Ohio State, Illinois, and Northwestern. So, again, we got to get through the season. I think today is a great day to step back and praise Tom Crean for getting this season back on the track to where we all thought it should be from the beginning. And now it's about, what does this team do from here? Are these changes sustainable? Can we compete with the best in the Big Ten? Because the whole notion of Indiana as an underdog is cute for a time, but this is Indiana University basketball, and we should be competing for Big Ten titles and not surprised when we're doing it. And so what has happened now is we've gotten things back to the baseline where it should be, to where we all have confidence moving forward that this is a team that can compete for the Big Ten, and I think Tom Crean deserves credit for that, but I don't think he deserves extra credit for it, if you get what I'm saying. So with that said, we are about to give our picks for IU Wisconsin, which is really kind of the first tricky game we've had to pick here as we've gone through this Big Ten season. And then going on with our last call, I do want to remind everyone, number one, to get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text Indiana to 44144. And Will has reminded me to remind you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which you can do at YouTube, assemblycall.com/YouTube. And if you are subscribed and if you have the YouTube app on your phone, then when we go live with a midweek show, or when we go live with our halftime report or the postgame show, you'll get an alert and you can just open it and you'll be taken right to the show. So it's especially convenient if you consume the Assembly Call live and on your mobile device. You want to be subscribed on YouTube. So to do that, go to assemblycall.com/subscribe. All right, well, let's wrap things up here on this jubilant, fun, excited, victorious episode of the Assembly Call as the Hoosiers win 89-57 today over Northwestern. We are now going to give our picks. Make sure that you deliver your picks. Go to assemblycall.com/picks to get your pick in before the next game tips. And that next game is against the Wisconsin Badgers in the Kohl Center on Tuesday, January 26th. Ryan is not here, so we would give him Wisconsin anyway, but he actually texted me earlier today that Wisconsin's going to be his pick. I'm sure he's definitely afraid of what the officiating will be like, and he realizes that, I don't know that we've won at Wisconsin. I don't know when the last time we won at Wisconsin. I'm not even sure that Ken Palm goes back that far for us to look.
It doesn't. So, I looked while we were on here. It does not. I think it goes back to 2002, and unless I just glossed over it, it does not go back that far.
All right, so it has been a long time, but I will say this is probably as good as any of us have felt going into a game at Wisconsin in a while, because they're not quite as up. We're on this big winning streak. So Andy has spontaneously combusted and disappeared from the Google Hangout. So Will, we will go to you first. And it looks like you have an answer to when Indiana last won at Wisconsin. Give us your answer and your pick.
Oh, I thought Andy only kind of combusts when he's angry. I guess he can do it out of, pure joy as well. Welcome back there, Andy. But here, I'll ask you, Jared. You guys want to know, I'll say this. We've won one time at the Kohl Center. Can you guess the year?
It wasn't the 2000. It wasn't.
It was before 2002. I can tell you that based on the Ken Palm stuff.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even remember. I mean, it's been so long.
1998. Oh, sorry, Andy.
And it wasn't even.
I was going to guess something in 2000, so I would have been wrong.
Well, there we go. But yeah,
Wow.
1998 is the last time that we got a win in the Kohl Center. We're on a current 13-game losing streak there. But hey, if we win, we'll be on a 13-game winning streak. So I'm going to go with that. I'm just going to ride the hot hand here. I'm going to say Hoosiers win. They're going to snap the 13-game losing streak at the Kohl Center and replace it with a 13-game winning streak this season.
I love it. I love the symmetry. Andy, your pick.
Man, that makes me feel super old. That was while I was still in college, and I was only 20 years old. Actually, I don't even think I was 20 years old yet. I was 19. Good God, I'm gonna go cry somewhere now. That was like when they said this was the first time I had been 7-0 Big Ten play since 1993, and like Yogi was either 4 months old or like 4 months from being born. that was disheartening. So this is just rubbing salt in that wound. But you know what? If I had been asked to pick this game probably a week ago, I probably would have taken Wisconsin just for the fear of the officials and everything else. But I've just been so impressed with how this team has played over these last couple games, and obviously they're at home. They haven't been in road environments, but just the way they're playing and coming together, it's tough to pick against them at this point. So I'm going to pick them. I certainly think it'll be, if IU wins, I don't think it's going to be another game like we've seen these last couple. It'll be a close one, but I think IU's just got more weapons at this point. And the way this team has shown the ability to pick one another up when somebody's not playing as well as they have the game before, different guys stepping up. So definitely will need to be a team effort, but I'll take the Hoosiers.
Yep, I think we are all legitimately afraid of going up there at Wisconsin just because of the problems that we've had winning there. Wisconsin playing a little bit better, but I'm with you guys. I'm picking Indiana to win this game. Indiana's going to lose at some point. I mean, if the 93 Hoosiers couldn't go undefeated in the Big Ten, clearly these Hoosiers aren't going to go undefeated. No one thinks that. But sitting at 7-0, you start to wonder, okay, when's that first loss going to come? And it will. But I'm going to let either the first loss come or for Indiana's performance to suggest to me that it will come before I'm going to pick against Indiana. And, I was worried going into the Ohio State game, and we blitzed Ohio State. And I was a little worried going into the Illinois game, and we killed Illinois. And, worried about the barn, and, I thought we played well there at the end of the game to win that one. And so, Wisconsin has two really good players, a third if you count Ethan Happ. That's been a really tough environment. We can expect the calls to not go our way. You can expect Ryan's rant to be about that. But unlike many, many seasons in recent memory where you could expect an IU loss at Wisconsin, I am not going in there expecting a loss. I'm going in there expecting a win, and I think this Indiana team is playing well enough to give us all faith that they can go up there and do it. So I'm picking Indiana. Will and Andy are picking Indiana. Ryan, his pick in absentia is Wisconsin, but that's not just us making it up for him. That is actually what he texted me earlier today. So with that said, let's go around the horn. Last call, our final thoughts on a blissful Indiana win in Bloomington today. Will, we will go to you first. Last call.
Last call. Well, geez, I'm feeling pretty good. This is the first 7-0 start in conference play since the 92-93 season. At the risk of making you guys feel any older, I just want to point out that I was only a few months old at the time, so take that for what it is. So I am a young whippersnapper, like Megan likes to call me out there. But, I'm just feeling pretty positive and just looking forward to you guys coming here next week. And just to throw some numbers out for that, since I am the stat guy, you guys are going to be traveling a combined 4,230 miles round trip.
Wow.
So,
that is a stat of the day right there. Good work, Will.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, last call.
I struggle to think of something that I've, could say now that I haven't said earlier. Maybe that's just because I'm so old according to these stats. But, again, I think it's hard not to be impressed with the way these guys have gone about this and to really, take a step back at this point. We're 7 games into the Big Ten season, so you're not quite halfway there, but you're getting close. You're past at least the third, through a third of the conference season. And to look back, even a month ago to what this team was playing like and the concerns about how they were playing and how they've addressed those, I think is really impressive. And I think any IU fan should be proud of that. And it's silly to feel any other way, to read any less into it based on who they've played. And they're an exciting team to watch again. They're fun to watch again. They're having fun playing together and being unselfish, and I think those to me are the things that those of us, however old we are, have kind of have drawn us to the program and made us the fans that we are, is being able to see teams come together and play in this way. And so I think these guys deserve a lot of credit, all the way from the managers and the players to the coaching staff, and how they've kind of turned this thing around, because it would have been real easy for this to turn into a complete dumpster fire, and they've certainly avoided that and really rebuilt a lot of the equity and the hope that had been lost based on how they played earlier in the season. So definitely a cool thing to see, and hopefully that travels well up to the Kohl Center on Tuesday night.
Yep, I agree. Good points, Andy. And yeah, I mean, look, my last call is simply this. We understand and acknowledge all of the caveats about Indiana's schedule so far. And again, a lot of us thought 7-0 or 6-1 was a reasonable expectation. Not a hope, but an expectation for these first 7 games. So again, I think what this start to the Big Ten season has done is just remind us that this team is more who we thought it was before the season started than what we saw in Maui. And so that doesn't mean that, again, that they should get extra credit for this. This is where this team should have been. But given how we've seen some past seasons go off the rails, I think you have to give the guys, the leadership, the coaches credit for getting it here. But, make all of those caveats for the competition, but by God, enjoy the games. Really enjoy the games. And I think one of the benefits that we get out of doing the show, and one of the reasons I love doing the show, is the hyper focus on each game, which, yes, can send you into some lows when Indiana plays really bad. But when Indiana plays well, it really reminds us to enjoy that win, to savor it, to chew on it for a little while, and get every bit of deliciousness and taste out of the victory, rather than just saying, that was Northwestern, that was Illinois, and they're not very good. Enjoy it. You only get 30-some times to watch your Indiana Hoosiers play, and when they come out and play like this, I mean, I don't care if these, who these performances are against. These are Big Ten teams coming into our building. This one was against a Big Ten team that went into Maryland, a supposed top 10 team, top 2 seed, like Andy said, 2 or 3 seed, and went in there and almost beat them. And only days later, with their big man healthier and more in rhythm, came into our house and we killed them by 32 points. So if you can't get excited about that, you're just a misanthrope. I don't know what else to say, but embrace this team. This team has embraced each other. They've embraced a toughness on rebound, or toughness on defense, a toughness in rebounding, a togetherness, a commitment to moving the ball that is beautiful to watch. And so it's time to fully embrace this team, to start having some confidence in them. And what's great is we'll start to see it. They have chance after chance after chance in February and March to prove that what we're seeing right now isn't a mirage. And frankly, when you come out and beat teams by 30-some points on your own home court, I just saw a stat that this is the first time since 87-88. If we all want to feel older, this is the first time since 87-88 that Indiana has won 3 straight home games by 25 or more points. So if you're waiting to be impressed, if you're waiting to embrace this team, I don't know what you're waiting for at this point, because this team has rebounded from its early season doldrums. It's playing great basketball. It's playing with togetherness. They're shooting the ball well. They're playing like an Indiana team should play. Let's get behind them, and it could be a really, really fun ride the rest of January, into February, and into March. And I'm excited to take it with this group of Hoosiers, because they're proving that they deserve that. And they've earned us all getting behind them. So let's do it, and hopefully that means another big win on Tuesday night against Wisconsin. No matter what happens, win or lose, we will be here to complain about the officiating and, more importantly, to break it down, the big keys to winning or losing, whatever happens. We will be here to talk about it. But we thank you for joining us live on this episode of the Assembly Call. We thank you for listening on the podcast. We thank you for listening on the Sports Buzz in Louisville. We appreciate all of you for making the Assembly Call audience and community what it is. And we will be here Tuesday night to talk IU Wisconsin after that game ends. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.